So continuing with our discussion on HTML, in the present lecture we would be talking about tables, HTML forms and something called style sheets in HTML. Now we start with our discussion on HTML tables. Now you know that we need to compose some data or some text or some other kind of materials in a tabular fashion in a number of different applications. For example, you know that that means we can show, for example, the marks obtained by a student in the form of a table, the name, roll number followed by the marks. There are a number of such applications where you need to format data in a tabular fashion with possibly margins and lines drawn between the successive elements along the rows and the columns. These are the so called tables. Now in HTML, tables can be used not only to store this kind of textual information in a suitably formatted form, but in contrast it can be much more general. Like a particular entry in the table need not be a text, it can even be an image. There are many applications where a number of small pieces of a larger image are stored in the form of a table. For example, there is a 3 by 3 table, 3 rows and 3 columns, and each of the entries store one portion of a bigger image, so that when all the entire images of a table are loaded and are shown together, so you can see the whole table. So let us see that how such HTML tables can be constructed and can be used. Well, tables, as I told you, tables are constructed using something called cells. So each element in the table is called a cell. Cells can be organized in rows and columns. So there are a few things we need to specify when we are talking about a table. Number one, how many rows are there, how many columns are there, and some sort of a delimiter or a marker that can identify, well, here one particular cell ends and the next cell starts. So there has to be some suitable marker or HTML tag that should uniquely specify exactly where a particular item is ending and another item is beginning. Similarly, it should also specify when a particular row is ending and the next row is starting. Okay. So tables can be constructed using the HTML tags table, tr and td. Of course, there is another tag called th, we will see it later, but these are the three basic tags, and a small example is given here. Firstly, the begin table and the end table tags bracket the definition of the table. This is the whole definition of the table. TR, the TR tag stands for table row. So here the table row begins and here the table row ends, and whatever is in between, that is this entire thing, this corresponds to the first row of the table. Similarly, we see there is another row which is starting here, there is the ending of that row, and similarly whatever is in between, that is the contents of the second row. So you see that using the tr tag we can specify each row of the table. So if the table has, for example, 100 rows, then there will be 100 tr begin and tr end tags spread across the table definition. Now let us see what happens within a particular row of the table. So within a row of the table, the tag td is used to identify or demarcate the individual cells of the table. You see begin td, end td, this identifies the first cell whose content is good. Similarly, td and end td bad. So this definition within a particular row tells you that there are two elements in a row. There are two td and NTD, TD and NTD, which means there are 2 cells in the row. Similarly, if you look at the second row, there will be similar thing, definition begins, ends, begins, ends. The contents are cute and ugly. So, you can understand that if you view this table on a browser, the table would look something like this. There will be 2 rows and 2 columns, good and bad first 2 rows, cute and ugly in the second row. Now, tables in general can be much more complex than this. If you have simple tables like this where items are organized in the form of fixed number of rows and fixed number of columns, you can do it like this, but there are a number of other ways to do it. Before going into it, let us formally look into the different tags in a little more detail. The first and the main tag that is required for using a table is of course the table tag, begin and end table. And as I had shown in the example, these tags identify or defines the beginning and the end of a table definition. Now, as part of the table definition, there are a number of attributes you can use. First one is background color. Background color can be specified by means of the conventional hexadecimal red, green, blue notation or by specifying the name of a color. Now, background color means when the table will be displayed on the browser, there will be a background color across the entire table that you can specify. For example, you can specify your background color will be yellow, then the entire table background will become yellow. Rules says, suppose I have a table like this, there are 3 rows and 2 columns. Rule means whether I want these lines to be drawn between the rows and columns or not. Rules or rulers means whenever the table is displayed, whether I want that those lines or rules should be drawn or not, and I can specify that which rule I want to draw and which I do not want to draw. Here you can see that the options are, I can specify all, which means all the lines will be drawn, rows, columns, everything. Only rules along the columns will be drawn, only rows will be drawn, and in some cases like the example of an image I had given, there I do not want lines to be drawn between the image pieces. So, here I will specify none. Secondly, I will specify how thick the lines will be. The border attribute specifies in terms of the number of pixels, whatever number I give here, that is a measure of the width. Border equal to 1 will be the thinnest, border equal to 5 will be thicker, border equal to 10 will be even thicker. That will tell you how thick the borders will be across the table, the rows and the column markers. And there is another attribute, height. Here you can specify the total height of the table in terms of the number of pixels or as a percentage of the total available area on the screen. Here if you specify this, the table will automatically resized according to whatever you have specified. Okay. So, this is how you can define characteristics about the table definition. Then comes the tag to define the table row. Begin tr and end tr, this actually defines a row of cells within a table. So, as the example had illustrated that whenever you have a particular row, it must begin with a begin tr and must end with a end tr. If there are 10 such rows, there will be 10 such pairs of begin and end trs in the table definition. So, these rows can come with a number of attributes. Of course, here these attributes can be defined separately for each individual row. Because this is an attribute which is corresponding to the tr tag, and since there are so many tr tags, there is one tr tag per row. So, you can say that for each and every row I can have different attribute definitions that would pertain to that particular row. Now let us see what kind of attribute definitions we can have. Well, here again we can have a background color attribute which will specify a color for that particular row. Now obviously this row color or background color will override the background color that was specified for the whole table. So with the table tag, if you had specified some other background color, then this particular background color will override that definition. Okay. And in addition, you can specify the cell alignment rules, that whether they will be left justified, centered, right justified, or spread across the width of the cell so that the left and right margins are justified. So you can specify what kind of justification you need. Okay. Normally when we compose a table, we give a caption to the table, a short name which identifies the purpose of the table, what the table is all about. Now in HTML, a table caption can be given using the caption tag which is available under the table definition. So within the begin caption and end caption, you can give any string in between which will appear as the caption. This provides a caption for the table, but this one restriction, this caption tag if present must immediately follow the table tag and precede all other tags like tr and others. This means that you cannot place caption anywhere you want. Caption must be immediately after the table begin tag. There should be a caption if you want to give a caption, followed by the actual description of the rows and the other information. Okay. Next comes the definition of the actual individual cells of the table. TD and NTD identifies the boundary of an individual cell definition. So if you recall the example we had given earlier, for each row there was a begin tr and end tr, and within a row for each cell in the row there was a begin td end td, begin td end td. So begin td end td identifies or demarcates an individual cell of the table. Okay. So it defines a table data cell. Now as I had mentioned earlier, a cell need not contain only text, it can have any kind of content. It can be an image, or in general you can do some table nesting. That means an entire table definition can be nested inside a table. That means in place of a cell you can give an entire table definition. So a particular cell can contain as if another table, smaller table, or it can contain an image. It can contain basically any kind of content, whatever you want to put in. The thing is that whatever you put in, they will appear on the screen in a suitably formatted form, in rows and columns nicely formatted. TD can also have several attributes. You can specify background color for the individual cells in the same format, RGB or the name format, and there are some construct column span and row span. This we shall be illustrating with some examples. Column span and row span, you will be using one of the two, both of course also you can use. Normally we use one of the two, but in general you can use both. Column span means normally when you define a cell of a table, if the table has 4 columns, then there will be 4 cells in the table. But in many cases we may want that a particular value or a number that you are showing that should span multiple columns. Something you suppose a table heading, marks obtained, but under marks obtained there can be physics, chemistry, mathematics, 3 columns. So you may want that the marks obtained this string to span over the 3 columns. Now this call span, this attribute exactly allows you to specify that how many columns it is spanning. Okay. So, call span equal to number, this actually tells you that the number of columns the current cell should span. Similarly, row span, if there is a row span, you may sometimes want that some cells be expanded in size, they can span more than one row and appear in that way suitably formatted there. So, you can use any combination of row span and column span to actually allow a particular element to appear on the table in any particular way you want. Okay. Fine. There is another attribute TH. TH is a short form of table header. This actually defines a table header cell. See, TH, see, when you have a table definition, suppose you have a table out here. Normally, the first row of the table will contain the heading, then the actual data rows will come, there will be multiple columns. Now, usually what we do, that the heading which will come here and here and here and here are displayed in a form which is more prominent than the actual data which is appearing in the following rows, usually in bold or italics we show it. Now, here this tag TH is very similar to the TR column, TR tag. This is very similar to TR in the sense that this identifies the beginning and ending of a row. This also does the same, but this is for a special row, the heading row or the header row, the first row of the table, that is the header. So, TH defines the header row, and it depends on the browsers of course, but most browsers will display the contents you are putting inside this definition in bold and centered, which is normally the way we want the table headings to come on the screen when a table is displayed. And the attributes are identical to the TD tag. You can specify a background, you can specify the rows and column spans, whatever. Okay. So, TH is a special tag you can use to specify the heading of a table. Now, let us take some very few examples of table definition which shows you some examples of rows and column spanning. First, we have the table definitions. There are two rows, begin tr, end tr, begin tr, end tr. The first row has a TD, a cell definition with a column span of 2, and that is all. There is no more cell, and the text inside is hello. This actually means that in the table there is only 2 columns, because your first row definition says that you have one cell, the column span is 2 with some value, and that is the only cell. Since the column span is 2, this immediately tells you that there are only 2 columns that can be fit in the table. You look into the second row, you see the same thing, there are actually two cells, but now there is no call span, they have been identified by 2 TD begin and ends. Now, if you look at the way the table will get displayed, you can understand what this means. Column span 2 means this text hello will be displayed spread across 2 columns, while in the second row the good and day will be displayed as 2 separate cells. Okay. So, in many cases we need to compose a table in this way, so you can use this call span like this. This is a very similar example, this uses row span. This says first one table begin, row begin, row end, there is another row begin, row end. Now, look carefully at the first row definition. There are 2 cells which are defined, one begin TD, end TD, there is another begin TD, end TD. Now, in the first row definition, you see there is a row span equal to 2, which means there is a row, there is this cell which is spanning across 2 rows, and by the side of it there is another cell with a content good. Now, good is not spanning across 2 rows, good spans only 1 row. So, the appearance will be something like this, as you can see here. This hello will be spanning 2 rows, good will be on the right, but it will be spanning only 1 row. Okay. And whatever comes in the second row, since hello has already spanned 2 rows, that will start from here onwards. So, there can be only one cell in the second row, day, it will come out here. Okay. So, when you are using row span, you should take care of this thing, that whenever you are spanning a row across multiple rows, the following rows will be getting one column less. So, that whenever you give the row definition for the following rows, you will be having one less TD declarations, cell declarations in them. This has to be kept in mind. Okay. This is a third example. This shows a table with a border 1. So, the whole table border gets displayed with a line, with lines of width 1. I have given a caption with my table. This will actually come on top of the table like this. The caption of the table will come here. Then the actual rows, first there is a table header. This is actually optional. This okay, there are 3 rows TR, TR, and in the first case TH tells you that these are the cells of the header. Okay. So, first one, name and marks, as I told you, this will be displayed in bold face. So, they are more prominent, while the second and third rows, they are using normal TD to define the cells, Anil 72, Kamal 58. So, this example shows you that when you are using the header TH to declare the cells, so you will be displaying this in bold letters, bold font, and when you are using TD, they will be appearing in normal font. But one thing is also clear from this table, that all rows including header, non-header, they must be delimited by begin TR and end TR. Okay. This must be there, and the other rows, and the other means the cells corresponding to rows, they will contain either TD or TH depending on whether they are a normal row or a header row. So, this means when you define a table, there can be a caption. Rows, each row including the header row must be beginning with a TR, ending with a TR, and the cell declarations will be using TH if it is a header row, will be using TD if it is a non-header row. Okay. So, using these constructs, you can construct any complicated or arbitrary table. We have given a very few small examples, but using these concepts recursively or repeatedly, you can construct a table of arbitrary complexity. There can be 10 columns, some entries may be spanning across columns, some rows may be spanning across several fields. So, you can have any combination of these two. Some of the entries may be images. For example, in the examples I have given, all the examples, the table entries are all texts, but I can use that img tag to include a GIF or a JPEG image in any entry of the table. That will allow you to display a particular image as part of a cell in the table. Okay. So, this table is a very useful way to represent information when you are showing it as part of a web page. Now, another very important way in which you can structure the information that appears on a web page is through the use of something called frames. So, let us now see what HTML frame actually consists of and how it can be used. Basically, frames constitute a method for dividing the browser windows into smaller sub windows. This is the basic idea, that we are dividing the window into several sub windows. Not only that, each sub window will display a different HTML document. This is unlike a table. In a table, the entire table definition is part of the same HTML document. If there are 10 cells in the table, then all the declarations of the 10 cells will be part of your same file. But now we are talking about something else. We are talking about the case where you have a complete page with several portions. Maybe there are 4 parts. On the first part, I am displaying some HTML page. In the second part, I am displaying an image. In the third part, I am displaying some other page. Maybe in the fourth part, I am playing some music. So, 4 different things are happening in the 4 places. So, as if I have split my window into 4 different windows where 4 different things are happening, and the information that are being displayed in the 4 windows can come from 4 different places. This does not come from the same HTML page, that is most important. Okay. So, an example of a page with a frame is shown in the next slide. I am showing it. Let us take this example. This is the web page of a conference. As you can see, IEEE 14th Asian Test Symposium. Now, although it appears in a very nice way, you can see that on the left side of the page there are some menus which are displayed. If you can read properly, home page, call for papers, industry session, paper status, etc. There are so many options. Now, user can click with the mouse on any one of this option, and whatever option is being clicked will get displayed in this central window, okay, in this central place. Whatever is displayed on the top, this will not change, this will remain fixed, and some of the sponsors logos are appearing here, they will also remain fixed. So, actually what you see on the screen is a web page constituting of 4 different frames. Okay. It says that the frames can display means independent HTML documents. Now, in this frame, for example, there is one frame like this, there is another frame like this, there is another frame like this, and the remaining is the main frame. So, there are 4 frames. Now, the way the frames work, as this example shows, are different. The contents of some of the frames may be fixed depending on the application for which you are developing the page. The headers and the sponsors information were fixed. The left side menu was also fixed, but it was of a different type. It was a clickable menu. There were hyperlinks associated with it, and the information you want to see is displayed in the central place. So, whatever you click on the left menu will appear in the middle part. Okay. So, there has to be a mechanism to tell that if I click it, this particular document has to be fetched into this particular frame and should be displayed there. So, there should be ways to do this in frames. Let us see how it can be done. But before that, there are some advantages and disadvantages to using frames. First, let us look at the advantages. So, as the example shows, it allows parts of the page to remain stationary, while the other parts can scroll or can change. They can unify resources that reside on separate web servers. Means whatever you are seeing on the different windows, they need not be coming from the same web server. They can be coming from 4 different web servers. So, we are unifying them on the same screen and we are displaying them in a suitable way. For browsers which do not support frame, we will see there is a tag called no frame, which tells the browser that if you do not understand frame, then you please use some alternative content which you can specify in place of the frame. This we will see later how you can do that. These are the merits, but some drawbacks are also there. Well, the first and obvious thing is that all browsers do not support frame. Of course, most of the modern browsers do. Documents nested in a frame is more difficult to bookmark. See, we are habituated with bookmarking a page. Normally when you bookmark a page, the document which is being shown is bookmarked. We come back later, click it, it comes. But now 4 different things are displayed in 4 different places, in 4 windows say. I can bookmark the entire page, but I cannot bookmark an individual frame. This I cannot do here. Okay. Load on the server can be significantly increased if there are a large number of frames, because each frame consists of an independent web page or a web document. So, if there are 4 frames, 4 different items have to be fetched. So, the load on the server will be increasing 4 times. You compare it with the case where there is a single HTML page which was fetched only once. Fetching a 10 kilobyte HTML page takes much less time than fetching 4 2.5 kilobyte pages, because there are overheads of connection establishment and termination. Okay. And lastly, this is a problem for search engines. Search engines cannot very easily handle frames and can identify documents that are located in some particular frame of a page. Okay, now let us look at the tags. The main tag with which you can define the frame is the frame set. Frame set can define a collection of frames or again recursively other frame sets. There are some attributes: columns, rows. Columns and rows, they actually establish, the columns establish the number of sizes of columns or vertical frames in a frame set. Similarly, rows will tell you that how many horizontal frames are there, because the frames may be divided in any arbitrary way. We will take some examples. There should be ways of specifying how the frames are divided. Okay. So, these rows and columns, these 2 attributes can be used to specify that, and the relative sizes of the individual frames can be specified in 3 ways. Either by using a number which actually gives you the number of pixels, percentage means the percentage of the total available area on the screen, or star or asterisk is a relative value. Relative value means you can specify like this, that well, I have 2 frames, one of which has a size of star, other has a size of 2 star, which means that the second one will be twice as wide as the first one. There are 3 you can say star, 2 star, 3 star. You can specify the relative widths, but the actual width will be dependent on the available space that is there on the screen. Okay. Fine. Now, within frame set you have a tag called frame which defines a single frame. There are some attributes. Frame border, it can be either 1 or 0. 1 means a border will be there, 0 means no border, whether you want a border or not. Source equal to a URL will tell you that which page you want to display in that particular frame. So, the entire URL you have to give there. Scrolling is an attribute, yes, no or auto. If you give yes, then a scroll bar will automatically come by default. No means it will not come by default. Auto means if space is not sufficient, then the scroll bar will come, otherwise it will not come. Margin width means, means on the available area you are defining a frame. Margin means on the 4 sides how much margin you want to keep, spacing. Margin width means on the left and right how much space you want to give. Margin height means on the top and bottom how much space. And you also can assign some name to this particular frame, this may be required to cross reference frames, as you shall see later. That means that why we need to do this. No frames tag, as I had mentioned, this specifies the contents to be displayed by browsers that cannot display frames. So, whatever is there in between, that will be handled only by the old browsers which cannot handle frames, but for modern browsers this tag will be not considered or ignored. Let us take some simple examples. Here there is an HTML file with some frame definitions out here. You see this frame set calls equal to star dot star. Star dot star means there are two columns, both are of equal width. You see, both frames will be defined like they are of equal width. On the left frame you display a page left.htm, on the right frame you display a page right.htm. This is how this particular frame will be displayed. And in case your browser do not support frames, then this particular message will be displayed, because this is placed within the no frames tag. So, this text message will get displayed by the browsers if it does not support frames. This is another example where again the frame set definition is here. So, you see the calls one, there are 3 columns 100, 2 star, star. This means first frame will be a fixed width 100 pixels wide. Second and third are relative, depending on the available space you have. The second one will be twice as wide as the third one. So, in this way you can specify, and here we have specified the source for 2 of them, the third one I have not specified. So, something will be displayed in the first and second one, but the third one will remain empty, right. Okay. This is a complex example. This is an example which also shows that frame set can be nested. So, this is the whole definition. First says that the first level frame set has 2 columns. First is 25%, this is a percent definition. So, of the total 25% of this space you leave for here, and the remaining 75% you leave from the rest. And on the left one you display 1.htm, this is here. But for the right one there is another frame set. So, now there are 3 rows of height 100 pixels, 150 pixels, 100 pixels. So, for the first 2 the pages are 2 and 3, this will be 2, this will be 3, and for the last one again there will be another frame set declaration which says 2 equal size columns star dot star, this and this, where 4.htm and 5.htm will be displayed. So, in this way you can actually compose any arbitrary frames, and you can put some materials in them, whatever you want to do. And as the example for that conference website I had shown earlier showed, that on the left side there was some menu, if you click something else was displayed in some other frame. Let us see how this can be done. So, when a hyperlink is clicked, by default the new page will get loaded into the same frame, but in that application we really did not want it to do that. We would click here and we would want that the page would be loaded somewhere here in some other frame. Okay? This is what we require, and let us see how we can do this. The first thing we need in order to do this is to assign a name to the frame where you want the page to appear. So, whenever you have the frame definition, of course you require the source file to be specified. Optionally you can also give a name to the frame. For example, here the name is ABC, and from the left when you are specifying the hyperlink, you can specify in which target frame that hyperlink should appear. Like, you can specify it in this way using a standard href tag, the hyperlink tag. you can specify the URL, and also you can specify the target frame, target equal to ABC. So, already some frame was defined with a name ABC. So, when you click on this new page, the page will get displayed on that ABC frame. So, in this way, by naming properly, you can actually do some cross reference across the frames. You click here, something appears there, you click there, something appears here, and so on. Okay. So, this is how you can do this. Now, there is another thing which is also an important concept in HTML, in fact, the modern versions of HTML. This is something called cascaded style sheets. Style sheets in HTML allows us to specify typography style and spacing instruction. There are some rules I need to define. For example, it is a heading. I want to display a heading. I want to tell that this is the font size, whether you want it in bold, whether you want any color, what are the rules to be followed, and how to attach these rules to one or more HTML documents or to some part of a document. These are the things we need to see. Some examples. See, H2 is a standard tag for heading, second level heading, but you can within curly bracket you can specify like this, within bracket color colon blue. This means I am specifying some rule for the H2 tag. Similarly, for paragraph P, I can specify font size 12, font family Verdana sans serif, I can specify. So, subsequently if I use the P tag, paragraph tag, then the text in the paragraph tag would be composed according to this rule. So, this is how we can specify rules in HTML, which is beyond the definition of, you can say, the default definition of HTML. Okay. There is something called inline styles which you can define as part of the HTML document, as this example shows. This is a header. In the begin header, using this style attribute, you can specify color colon blue. So, this heading will be appearing in blue. Similarly, for paragraph, you can specify by style again the exact font in which you want this paragraph to appear. So, it will appear like this. Since this is part of the same document, same file, you call it inline. The embedded style sheets are also possible. Embedded style sheet means you have a begin style, end style tag. So, you give some name or some type to this style. This is a text cascaded style sheet type, and this is a special marker. This is the beginning and this is the ending, and within this you can define all the styles you want to define. The advantage of this style of definition is that all the definitions you can put in one place. Not only in one place, you can even store it in some other file. You can import that file from a main HTML file. Okay. So, after this, when you have the main file, you can use those H2, those P, these tags as part of your document. And external style sheet, as I said, this is exactly what I told you, that we can define all these styles together and store it somewhere else in some other file. This is external style sheet. You collect all these styles in a separate document and you create links to that document. There is a link tag using which you can link a style sheet. So, you can specify in which file this style sheet is mentioned. Of course, type is text CSS. These are some optional parameters you can give, but this is how you can specify. Once you give it at the beginning, so after that you can give your HTML document and description after that. So, we have just given a brief introduction to cascaded style sheets. If you look into the literature, into the books, you will find that there are many other different ways and options there, but the idea is same, that you want a method to expand the capabilities of HTML, to expand the way that information gets displayed on the screen of the browser. As a user, you can define that. As a web designer, you can define that. Okay. There can be several style definitions in hierarchy. say for the whole document there can be one style definition, for a particular paragraph there can be a style definition, there will be some overruling methods. So, this is sometimes called cascading. There are several rules and then one of them can override the other. That is why the name CSS or cascaded style sheet comes from. Actually they are style sheets with some cascading rules. That means you can have number of them, you can use them in any particular order. There are some overriding rules which will take priority over the other. Okay. So, with this we come to the end of today's lecture. Now, let us have a quick look at the solutions to the questions we had posed in our last class. What are the tags used for unnumbered lists? Well, this is easy, UL and LI, list item you have to specify. Tags for ordered lists, OL and LI. How can you change the bullet style in unnumbered list? Bullet style, there is an attribute, you can use an attribute. There are three possibilities, you can have a disc, circle or square. You can change the bullet style to one of these three, and this can be associated with either UL or the LI tags. Show hyperlink definition that provide link to PDF file and a JPEG image. Just you give A, then href, just a PDF file, that is all, followed by some texts which will be hyperlinked. And for JPEG image it will be same, only this will refer to a JPEG file. Next question, can relative URL be used to provide link to a different website? No, relative URL is used only when referring to the same website. That is why relative addressing is possible. So, when you are referring to document on some other web server, the name of the server must also be mentioned, which means you need absolute URL. Otherwise, how will you tell that which server you are wanting to refer to? You need to give the entire path. Okay. How can you provide a hyperlink to a section in the same document? Well, this is firstly you have to define a name to a section, say tennis, and you can provide a link by giving this hash followed by this name. These are called the anchor points in a document. You can define anchor points and you can refer anchor points in the A tag, so that it points to a particular paragraph or a region of the same document. How can you provide a hyperlink to a section and document located on some other web server? Provide a link to the named section using absolute URL. Here also you can use this kind of hash notation, but you have to use absolute URL, not relative URL as in the previous example. Okay. Otherwise it is same, the anchor definition will be there in the other page, but here you are simply giving the name hash tennis. So, when the new page comes on the screen, you will see that something is coming starting from that definition tennis onwards. Okay. What do the height and width attributes in IMG tag specify? They specify the height and width of the image in the browser window. Of course, most of the modern browsers can resize the image also using these values or overriding these values. How can you provide an image hyperlink? Using this IMG tag within A. Okay. This is how we can provide. Now, the questions for today's lecture. What are the HTML tags associated with table definitions? So, all the tags that we had talked about in connection with the table, that has to be mentioned. How do you specify table entries spanning multiple columns? Okay, this I have discussed. What is the purpose of the frame set tag? Well, you should distinguish that what is frame set, what is frame, what is the distinction between these two, and means how they are related. So, basically this question is, what is the purpose of the frame set tag? Fourth question, what is the purpose of the no frames tag? This also I have mentioned. 5. What does this asterisk or star signify when specifying the width and or height of a frame? This also we had illustrated with the help of some examples. What does percentage signify when specifying the width height of a frame? Again, this also we had given an example. What is inline style for specifying style sheets? Give an example. What is external style for specifying style sheets? So, in this lecture we had talked about some aspects of HTML. Now, HTML is not the end of the story. There are some other technologies which have developed, which has come up subsequently to supplement HTML, to replace HTML, to be a technology of the future, you can say. And one such language is a language called XML, or extensible markup language. Now, in our next lecture we shall be talking about XML. We shall see its similarities to HTML and the ways in which it also differs from HTML, and we shall see how we can use XML not only for creating web pages, but for other applications. Thank you. Welcome back. We have been talking about the issue of design of web pages. We had talked about HTML in the last few lectures, and we had also talked about that there are some other technologies which have come up subsequently. This HTML is not the only way in which you can go ahead in time. There are other more powerful and more flexible solutions and languages which has come up. In today's lecture we shall be taking up one such language for the purpose of discussion, and this is extensible markup language, which is more commonly known by its acronym XML. So, first let us try to understand what is XML. See, we had seen HTML earlier. HTML is a language using which you can create the web pages. It is a markup language. Markup language means we specify the textual content of the document, as well as we specify how the textual content should be structured or should be viewed on the screen. The concept of the tags and attributes come from there. So, this is what a markup language is. Now, XML, like HTML, is also a markup language. So, here lies a similarity. Let us see. So, XML is also a markup language. Well, although here we are talking about creating documents, we shall see later that XML has been used not only for creating document, but for many other applications as well. There is some structured information that we can capture through tags like HTML. Markup language, as you know, is a markup language use of tags is a mechanism to identify structure. For example, a begin paragraph and end paragraph tag will tell you that, well, this is a paragraph in the document. Begin H1, end H1 will tell you that this is a heading in the document. So, these are structured information which you can extract. So, structured information will contain content which can be text, which can be other form of information, also image, and also it should contain indication of what role the content plays. For example, I gave you some examples: heading, paragraph, address. But one problem with HTML is that the set of tag is limited by the definition of HTML. If, for example, I want to define a new tag for country, for city, I do not have it, but in XML we can do it. We can define our own tags. We shall see it later. So, if you compare now XML and HTML, you are likely to encounter in the document. Okay. These XML elements are like tags. So, XML elements, they are the most important form of markup or the way of specifying some sections of the document or text, whatever you are doing or writing. Now, XML elements, when you are using, they must contain a start tag and a matching end tag, just like HTML. You can say that in HTML the elements are predefined and you are calling them tags. So, begin tag, end tag, there are ways of doing it. End tag starts with a slash with the same name. So, here also that syntax remains the same. A small example, an element we are calling it city, end element slash city, in between some text. Well, this text can be arbitrary, but in the context of XML, we understand that this Kharagpur is the name of a city. So, an application which is reading the data will understand that this Kharagpur is part of an element called city. So, the application understands that this is the name of a city. Okay. So, semantic is also captured here very nicely. And as I mentioned in that example, that if you have empty elements, you can write them by putting a slash after the name of the element. Well, here alternatively you can also use both the tags without any content in between, blank. And one thing to note is that unlike HTML, XML is case sensitive. So, when you are defining an element city, lowercase city and capital City are not the same. You must follow the same case convention when you are using XML, when you are just using XML for some other applications. There is some naming convention for the element. That means when you define, for example, I have given the name city. So, how you can define names? There are some simple rules. The rule says that the name must begin with an underscore or a letter. Letter means a character A to Z. But within the name you can have any number of letters, digits, underscore, hyphen and dots or periods. So, any combination of this will constitute the name of an element. So, an element you can construct using any combination of these.